Gotta get used to that. Yeah, good morning and welcome. I am Annette Lovell. I am your worship associate today. And it's nice to see all of these faces on this winter blustery day. At least a few made it in. We are here today with Reverend Kevin Carson and our media tech, Vic Allen, which we very, very much appreciate. We welcome you, whether this is your first time finding us, and there are a few faces, new faces, or if you're a longtime member or friend. We welcome you if you come with troubles or concerns and you're trying to find answers to soothe your soul. We welcome you if you are seeking a new way of thought or direction, especially this time of season. It could be hard for a lot of people. We welcome you if you have joined us today just because you had nothing better to do and you wanted to see what the UUs were doing. So whatever the reason, everyone is welcome here. As always, we'd like to start our service with a few announcements, and there's been quite a few that have been added, so we'll just start at it. First of all, if you're online and you're joining us, please sign into the chat box and let us know that you are here. Also, that we'll be doing joys and concerns later in the service, and if you want to participate, make sure you put that in the chat box, and we will grab it off of there. There will be a new pathway to membership class offered soon. So if you're interested in taking the Unitarian Universal, or you're interested in taking Unitarian Universalism to the next level and are interested in becoming a member, please talk to Reverend Kevin or Vic in the office so that they can get that class organized and utilized. The next Philosophical Society will be meeting Wednesday, December 14th.
Tuesday, December 13th.
Oh, it's been changed.
Yeah, because Vespers is on Wednesday.
Oh, okay. Tuesday, December 13th, 7 o'clock, and they're talking about tradition. Our annual winter pageant is coming up December 18th. So if you're interested in being a part of we used to call it our children's pageant, but everyone gets involved. It's a solstice celebration. Please talk to Elizabeth Coyote. We need lots of hands being involved with our pageant.
It is a pickup pageant, though, so you can just show up on the morning of and still participate.
That is true. Absolutely. We just take you as you come. Our Wayfair pulpit outside has a new sign that is coming. Is that right, Catherine?
It's in.
Oh, Catherine has arranged to have a new sign, so check it out. And we want to give a big thank you for making that happen. A reminder that next Sunday is our second Sunday potluck. That is a go, so please plan on bringing a potluck if you can, something to share, and stay after the service. And the last announcement is we are decorating the sanctuary today after church, and many hands are needed. So if you can stay for an extra 15, 30 minutes or so and help, that would be very much appreciated. Are there any others I haven't got?
Yes, Ron Goins gonna get up and speak briefly.
Ron,
Goins. I had to bribe him.
we have an announcement from Ron.
Thousands of dollars.
Little arm twisting there. Victoria asked me to come up and say, why do I come to this church? And why do I support this church? And I've been trying for a couple of weeks to come up with words to describe. But I guess the primary reason, and I see this, are 7 basic principles really resonate with me. This church is very important to me, and that's really why I financially and otherwise try to support this church. One of the big things is when you have the welcoming here, that really welcomes everyone. And to me, that is extremely important. But anyway, I had lots more I probably could say, but I'm not going to give a sermon. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Ron. Now let us prepare for worship with a few moments to settle in, calm our minds and our breathing. Let us breathe together deeply, listening to one another, and I will ring the peace bowl 3 times. We will begin with our prelude. Thank you, Jessica. It's a great way to start a Sunday morning. So we covenant together as a group, a congregation, and reiterate to ourselves certain principles every week. Please recite with me our congregation's covenant, and then we will light our chalice. Love is the spirit of this community, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And we light this chalice to find inner peace, love for each other, and faith in ourselves. Also to be welcoming to whomever we meet and kind to all living creatures. So gather around this light of hope as we share this time together.
Good morning. Our call to worship this morning comes from James Luther Adams, one of the great theologians of the 20th century. I call that church free which enters into covenant with the ultimate source of existence, that sustaining and transforming power not made with human hands. It binds together families and generations, protecting against the idolatry of any human claim to absolute truth or authority. This covenant is the charter and responsibility and joy of worship in the face of death as well as life. I call that church free that brings individuals into a caring, trusting fellowship, that protects and nourishes their integrity and spiritual freedom, that yearns to belong to the church universal. It is open to insight and conscience from every source. It bursts through rigid tradition, giving rise to new and living language, to new and broader fellowship. It is a pilgrim church, a servant church, an adventure of the Spirit. The goal of the prophet is the prophethood and priesthood of all believers, the one for the liberty of prophesying, the other for the ministry of healing. It aims to find unity and diversity under the promptings of the Spirit that bloweth where it listeth and maketh all things new. I invite you now to rise in body or spirit and join in singing our opening hymn, number 360, Here We Have Gathered.
Before my time for all ages today, I want to share with you all that I will be going on leave in January, February, and March. And you can ask me or Reverend Kevin any questions you have after the service. My story is The Real Gift, and it's part of Wonderful Welcome, a Curriculum and Tapestry of Faith online. Nelson was worried. He had been worried about something all week, and this afternoon it was going to happen. During cleanup at church school, he decided to talk to his teacher, Lilia. "Nelson, is everything okay?" she asked. "Well, not really. My Nana Elsa is moving in with me and my dad's today." "It sounds like you do not want her to move in," Lilia said. "Our house will be too crowded," Nelson said, "and now I will have 3 grown-ups telling me what to do. My grandmother, my dad, and my dad's." Lilia took a minute to think. Then she said, "You know, Nelson, both your dads are my friends, and I know your grandmother too. I know they all love you very much. It may take time to get used to her living with you, but I think it is important that you welcome Nana Elsa, even though you are worried," Lilia said. "Welcome her? Why? She is already in my family," Nelson said, puzzled. "Nana Elsa may be worried today too," said Lilia. "She is moving into a home where 3 people already live. She might be worried that you and your dads don't really want her there. It will be important to let her know that you do love her." Nelson thought Lilia was probably right. Nana Elsa might be feeling worried today too. When he got home, Nelson made a card for his grandmother. He drew himself, his dad's, and Nana Elsa standing in front of their apartment building. He wrote, "Welcome, Nana. I love you. Love, Nelson." He brought the card into the extra bedroom where his grandmother was putting her clothes into the dresser drawers. "Hi, Nana. I wanted to give you something," he said. "Oh, thank you very much, Nelson," she said. "I love this card. I wanted to give you something too, but then I thought it would be better for us to make it together." "Make what?" Nelson asked. "May I teach you how to crochet? It is easy. We could make a small blanket together to put on your legs when you watch TV," Nana Elsa said. "Can I pick the color? I really like green," Nelson said. The next day, Nelson and his grandmother walked to the craft store and bought green yarn and crochet needles. For 2 weeks, almost every day, Nelson sat with Nana Elsa after school, talking and crocheting. When the blanket was finished, Nelson took it to church to show Lilia. "Wow, you made that with your grandmother?" Lilia said. "That sounds like fun, and it looks warm." Nelson loved that blanket. He took it everywhere with him. Because he took it everywhere, one day when he wanted to take it to bed with him, he couldn't find it. Soon the whole family was looking for it, but the green crocheted blanket was gone. At bedtime, Nelson was still upset. Nana Elsa sat on his bed and held his hand. "Nelson, I hate to see you so sad," she said. "But Nana, we made that blanket together. I love it so much, and now it's gone," he cried. "I know you feel bad. But you know, Nelson, the most important gift was not the blanket," said his grandmother. "It was the time we spent making it. You made me so happy when you welcomed me into your home. I wanted to spend special time with you making something, and we did that. The real gift was the time we spent being together. We will always treasure that time and our love for each other and our family." Nelson looked up at Nana Elsa. He rubbed the tears away from his face. He realized his Nana was right. The time they spent together was the real gift, and he realized he was glad now that his grandmother lived with him and his dad's. "I love you very much, Nana," he said. "I love you very much too, Nelson." The end.
I'll get it one of these days. Anyway, it's time for our joys and concerns. It's a tradition that many of us really appreciate. It's our times where we let people in during the week and let us connect with one another. So I will read. We have quite a few of them that have been written today. First one from Karen Schaefer. She says, two concerns. Meal on Wheels is already $40,000 over budget for meals for seniors. They are also needing more drivers. 220 meals are served a week, and they have 12 drivers. That is quite a need. And another one from Karen Schaefer. She says District 91 is also over budget for subsidized school lunches, okay, and breakfast by about $44,000. This money will be drawn from some other part of the school funding. So if you can donate, how can someone donate? Is there a fund you can do? Okay. Okay, good to know. We also have a joy from Ron Goyne. He says, the opera yesterday was great, wonderful costumes and gorgeous music. Oops, excuse me. Layla has a concern. Her friend Gwen is recovering from a serious bout with COVID. We are so sorry that it is still around, if anyone's guessing. And a joy, Anita Carpenter has a successful procedure to check her Watchman device on Thursday. I don't know what that is, but... Oh, heart. Thank you, Layla. What's that? Thank you. And a joy from Victoria. Cross-country skiing and more snow on the way. And I have a joy, and the past month has been busy. So 4 weeks ago, I was able to perform the wedding ceremony for my daughter and her new husband. And it was, yes, stressful, yes, difficult, and beautiful. And what an honor it was for me to do that. And right after I performed that wedding ceremony, I had another acquaintance step up and asked me to perform a wedding ceremony for her and her partner. They've been together for 28 years and decided to make it legal after 28 years. So I performed 2 wedding ceremonies this month, and it's been, what a joy. Just, you got to grow and learn and do new things as we get older. So we also light one, are there any in the chat? Okay. We'll light one more for all the joys and concerns which we choose not to share today.
Well, if you're visiting with us today for the first time, either online or in person, I want to warn you that today's service is not typical for us. It's a little different today. Instead of the usual readings and a topical sermon, today I'll be talking about some important changes proposed for the foundational document of our denomination that we will be voting on at our annual General Assembly next June. So parts of this may be a little dry. Check out some of our archive services on YouTube or visit about any other Sunday for a better taste of how we usually worship together. On the bright side, if you are curious about our Unitarian Universalist faith, this is an excellent opportunity to learn about our values and beliefs, and it is a demonstration of how seriously we value the democratic process in our tradition. Our Unitarian Universalist Association does have a governing leadership structure for the denomination at the national level, but they are not invested with the kind of ecclesiastical authority that lets them simply announce doctrinal or organizational changes. We are an association of congregations. Changes like I will discuss today are the result of a somewhat complex democratic process involving all our congregations, and I will speak more about this in part 2 of my reflection today. The reason I felt the need to do this today is that the draft changes came out in late October, and since they've been circulating, it has been creating a lot of anxiety and confusion among Unitarian Universalists around the country. I felt it would be good to present them with some of my own thoughts to stimulate further discussion in the weeks and months ahead. So to begin, I want to go through the text of the section of the UUA Bylaws as it currently stands, and then go through the text of the proposed changes. After I do this, we will have our offering to give you a chance to digest the material and reflect for a few moments before part 2 of my reflection. Hopefully everyone here has a handout of the text, and we sent it as a PDF in the service link email to those on our list. So, the current UUA bylaws, adopted in 1961 and then revised over the years, most recently in 1987, from Article 2 in Section C is what we're concerned about with the changes. And so the current version is where we find our 7 principles and sources. So I'll just read through this. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. The living tradition which we share draws from many sources. Direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder affirmed in all cultures, which moves us to renewal of the spirit and an openness to the forces which create and uphold life. Words and deeds of prophetic people which challenge us to confront powers and structures of evil with justice, compassion, and transforming power and love. Wisdom from the world's religions which inspires us in our ethical and spiritual life. Jewish and Christian teachings which call us to respond to God's love by loving our neighbors as ourselves. Humanist teachings which counsel us to heed the guidance of reason and the results of science, and warn us against idolatries of the mind and spirit. Spiritual teachings of earth-centered traditions, which celebrate the sacred circle of life and instruct us to live in harmony with the rhythms of nature. Grateful for the religious pluralism which enriches and ennobles our faith, we are inspired to deepen our understanding and expand our vision. As free congregations, we enter into this covenant, promising to one another our mutual trust and support. In part 2, purposes. The Unitarian Universalist Association shall devote its resources to and exercise its corporate powers for religious, educational, and humanitarian purposes. The primary purpose of the association is to serve the needs of its member congregations, organize new congregations, extend and strengthen Unitarian Universalist institutions, and implement its principles. Part 3, inclusion. Systems of power, privilege, and oppression have traditionally created barriers for persons and groups with particular identities, ages, abilities, and histories. We pledge to replace such barriers with ever-widening circles of solidarity and mutual respect. We strive to be an association of congregations that truly welcome all persons and commit to structuring congregational and associational life in ways that empower and enhance everyone's participation. Part 4, freedom of belief. Nothing herein shall be deemed to infringe upon the individual freedom of belief, which is inherent in the Universalist and Unitarian heritage, or to conflict with any statement of purpose, covenant, or bond of union used by any congregation unless such is used as a creedal test. And just for some historical background, that last phrase it was often called the Liberty Clause, and it dates back to the 1700s in Universalist churches, so it's kind of a get out of jail free no matter what you've agreed to in the previous statement. So I'm glad that it was still in there. So that's the way they stand as of today, as most recently revived in the 1980s. Now is the draft of the proposed revisions, and I'll talk about how we got there and what it means going forward in part two of my reflection today. First, you'll notice that the purposes section has been moved to the very top instead of the 7 principles. So in part 1, purposes, the Unitarian Universalist Association shall devote its resources to and exercise its organizational powers for religious, educational, and humanitarian purposes. Its primary purposes are to equip congregations for vital ministry, to support and train leaders, both lay and professional, to heal historical inequities, and to advance our Unitarian Universalist values in the world. We will transform the world by our liberating love. Then section 2, and you'll see there's a diagram that they've added to kind of clarify things. Part 2 is our values and covenant. They've changed it from principles and sources, and now we're talking about values and covenant. Love is the enduring force that holds us together. As Unitarian Universalists and religious community, we covenant congregation to congregation and through our association to support and assist each other in engaging our ministries. We draw from our heritages of freedom and reason, hope and courage, building on the foundation of love. Love inspires, empowers the passion with which we embody our values. Inseparable from one another, these shared values are justice. We work to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all people thrive. We covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of oppression within individuals and our institutions. We are accountable to each other for this work. Generosity. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. We covenant to freely share our faith, presence, and resources. Compassionate generosity connects us to one another in relationships of mutuality. Evolution. We adapt to the changing world. We covenant to collectively transform and grow spiritually and ethically. Evolution is fundamental to life and to our Unitarian Universalist heritages, never complete, never perfect. Pluralism. We celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, theology, and experience. We covenant to learn from one another and to openly explore the depth and breadth of our many wisdoms. We embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. Equity. We declare that every person has the right to flourish with dignity and worthiness. We covenant to use our time, wisdom, attention, and money to build and sustain a fully inclusive and accessible community of communities. Interdependence. We honor the sacred interdependent web of all existence. With humility, we understand our place in the web. We covenant to care for and respect the earth and all beings by fostering relationships of mutuality. We work to repair the bonds we have broken. So instead of the various 6 sources, they've now changed that to one paragraph called Inspirations. As Unitarian Universalists, we draw upon and are inspired by the full depth and breadth of sacred understandings as experienced by humanity. Grateful for the religious lineages we inherit and the pluralism which enriches our faith, we are called to ever deepen and expand our wisdom. Then section 4 on inclusion. Systems of power, privilege, and oppression have traditionally created barriers for persons and groups with particular identities, ages, abilities, and histories. We pledge to replace such barriers with ever-widening circles of solidarity and mutual respect. We strive to be an association of congregations that truly welcome all persons who share our values. We commit to structuring congregational and associational life in ways that empower and enhance everyone's participation. And finally, freedom of belief, a liberty clause again. Nothing herein shall be deemed to infringe upon the individual freedom of belief, which is inherent in the Unitarian Universalist heritages or to conflict with any statement of purpose, covenant, or bond of union used by any congregation, unless such is used as a creedal test. In expressing our beliefs, we do so in the spirit of love in ways that further beloved community. An offering to support the ministry of this church will now be given and gratefully received. So I know you haven't had a whole lot of time to take all of that in, but that'll be your first taste of it, and we'll talk about that a little bit too. The phrase sacred cow is a reference, of course, to the way cows are venerated in India by many Hindus as sacred animals. And as an English figure of speech, it refers to something considered immune from question or criticism, sometimes even unreasonably so. The problem with the idea of literal sacred cows is that they are both considered to be sacred and they are cows, creatures that are useful to us for their milk and to some of us for their meat, and for pulling things like carts and plows with their immense strength. This can present a dilemma about how we treat them, and this is true for metaphorical sacred cows as well. As you might have already guessed, I suggest that the 7 principles and 6 sources outlined in Article 2 of our current UUA Bylaws have become the sacred cows of Unitarian Universalism over the last 60 years since the American Unitarian Association and the Universalist Church of America merged to form our present Unitarian Universalist Association. The problem these sacred cows now present is that they have become so integral to what it means to be a Unitarian Universalist that the idea of substantial changes to the language triggers an emotional response in many of us that we are forced to confront. Though our historical roots are deep, our Unitarian Universalist Association today is a relatively new religious movement. And like any religion, the doctrines, rituals, and symbols of our faith that emerge over time are important to creating a sense of identity. When we light our chalice or recite our covenant during worship, it reinforces that identity and our sense of belonging. And our 7 principles are likewise an important part of that identity. Unlike the 10 Commandments or the Quran, which believers claim to be the direct revelations of God's Word, or the 4 Noble Truths of Buddhism, which are claimed to be the original teachings set forth by the Buddha, we know our 7 principles are not Holy Writ, but the result of the human imagination, the wordsmithing of numerous Unitarian Universalist and committees voted upon by our member congregations. We consider them to be part of a living, changeable document. And we even have the mechanism for amending the language written into another section of the bylaws, knowing that society and our faith will inevitably evolve. Just think about how different attitudes about race, sexual identity, and even female clergy are today compared to 1961. But even knowing the human origins of our bylaws and our 7 principles, and to much lesser degree our 6 sources, have become a cherished, dare I say, sacred articulation of what it means to be a Unitarian Universalist. We take pride in being a creedless religion that is more focused on how we do religion together, but our 7 principles are venerated nonetheless. They are printed in the front pages of our hymnals and on bookmarks and posters, and we even have a children's version that is woven into a variety of religious education curricula and materials. Many congregations have our principles framed on the walls, and sermon series on the 7 principles are a common practice. I have preached several sermons on the principles myself. And in my younger days, there was a time when I used the 7 principles with prayer beads as a daily meditative practice. The initial language of our bylaws was often a result of compromise in order to facilitate the 1961 merger. And though we UUs have become very fond of our 7 principles since then, it is important to remember that they have changed over time. And in the last few years, there have been additional changes in discussion. Hence the reason for the Article 2 Study Commission that was created in the fall of 2020. And the draft new language is the result of their work and the input and feedback from many individuals. As it states on the UUA website, our current principles and purposes were last revised in 1987. At General Assembly 2017, there was discussion of amending the principles to add an 8th principle, addressing racism, and an amended 1st principle addressing non-human life. The 5th principle was the subject of a report in 2009, which dealt with the ways in which GA and other UU gatherings do and don't embody an inclusive democratic process. The 7th principle has also been the subject of discussions about possible amendments. There have been many projects, resolutions, task force, and other strategies that have come from the Board, Commission on Appraisal, and grassroots groups, which encourage us to take a look at our principles, purposes, bylaws, and rules. It is time for us to do a review and make changes so that we are living into the Unitarian Universalism of the future, a Unitarian Universalism that holds us in times of great need and ethical, moral, and spiritual crises. We are in one of those times now. In response to those discussions, the UUA Board committed to establishing this Article 2 Study Commission to consider possible amendments to this article. So this brings us to the present state. And there are several opportunities over the next 2 years to modify the language even more. The process for making changes may seem overly complicated and bureaucratic, but I think it is good that we don't change our fundamental documents lightly. Going forward, as it states on the UUA website, in the fall of 2022, the Article 2 study held feedback sessions and surveys on different drafts of Article 2, each draft informed by previous feedback sessions and surveys. At the end of this feedback cycle, the Article 2 Study Commission will submit its recommendation for a new Article 2 to the Board of Trustees in January 2023. After the Board of Trustees receives the recommendation, Article 2 forums will be held at the regional level to get people talking about the proposal. There will be a mini assembly in May 2023 for congregational delegates to offer amendments to the proposal. Amendments to the proposal approved by the mini assembly may be added to the proposal by the Board of Trustees or placed on the General Assembly agenda for consideration. The final version of Article 2, as amended by the Board of Trustees and/or the 2023 General Assembly, must receive a simple majority vote to move forward for a final vote at the 2024 General Assembly. It will take a 3/4 majority vote at the 2024 General Assembly to be adopted as the new Article 2 of the UUA Bylaws. If either vote fails, a similar proposal cannot be considered for 2 years. The bottom line, if you feel strongly about changing the new language, you can submit your thoughts during one of these points in the phases for consideration. It has been my experience that even contentious language changes can gain enough support at times through our democratic process. The sausage making can get a little rough on occasion, but we generally do a good job of listening and coming up with acceptable language that most people can support. Now, I confess that I really haven't made up my mind on the changes. They recommend reading through the proposals several times and gauging your reaction before reaching a final conclusion. My initial reaction has been mostly positive. I'm glad to see love acknowledged as central to our faith. And I think the explicit addition of evolution as a value is very good. I also like the way the language of the proposed 8th principle on anti-racism, which this congregation voted overwhelmingly to support at our last annual meeting in January, was worked into the language about our value of justice, rather than keeping it as a separate item. And I'm very pleased to see the phrase, the sacred interdependent web of all existence, as someone who feels a strong spiritual connection to nature that is much deeper than the respect described in the current 7th principle. My only initial criticism would be about the sentences in the purposes section, we will transform the world by our liberating love. It is not that I disagree with the idea or that I don't feel we offer a liberating love to the world through our faith, but I feel it is an aspirational goal, in the very least, to transform the world. We can certainly do our small part, and we will in so many ways, but the world has got a great need, and we will need a lot of help from the other 8 billion inhabitants of our planet to accomplish such a transformation. Other than that, I commend the Commission for its work. It's not easy to reach a consensus on language among Unitarian Universalists over the least thing, let alone our foundational documents. But I also know that the language as it stands is not as easily publicized as a list of 7 principles and 6 sources. And I can appreciate the sentiment of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'll be curious to see what happens as we churn through this process. I suspect some version of the changes will ultimately be approved in the end, but we might just vote to keep things the way they are for the near future. And that would be fine with me too. So here's what I'm asking from you. Please read through this material and reflect on your feelings over the coming months. Please discuss it during coffee hours and any group meetings, and feel free to set up an appointment with me to discuss it if you like. I'll also make sure we set up 1 or more forums for congregational discussion before the General Assembly in June. Attendance at the upcoming GA in Pittsburgh to vote is either in person or virtual, and our congregation has allowed 2 non-clergy voting delegates, plus myself as minister, Elizabeth as director of Lifespan Faith Development, and Reverend Lynn Stanglin Cameron as minister emerita. I can't speak for the others, and there is no restriction on our right of conscience. But for something this important, I commit to taking a vote of the congregation and casting my vote according to the results. As you think about this, ask yourself if the proposed language truly represents our larger faith and our values, no matter what individual spiritual journey you are on. Is it sufficient, or is there something you really think needs to be added? And if you just hate the idea of replacing the familiar list of 7 principles, consider if the new language is the problem or if you're just anxious about letting go of our sacred cows. Change can be difficult and stressful. Let us trust the process and trust our fellow Unitarian Universalists to navigate the stormy seas ahead in good faith. May it be so. I invite you to rise in body and spirit once again and join in singing our closing hymn, number 113, Where is Our Holy Church? Our closing words come from the 19th century minister, Reverend Theodore Parker. Be ours a religion which, like sunshine, goes everywhere, its temple all space, its shrine the good heart, its creed all truth, its ritual works of love, its profession of faith divine living.
It's now time to extinguish our chalice with the following words. They are in your order of service. Please read along with me. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. It is time for our postlude. Be safe and be well today.